Hello, we're back with Telltale. I'm Greg,
And I'm Emily.
and tonight we're going to talk to you about Portal Fantasies. It's a big subgenre of fantasy that covers a lot of different types of stories. Everything from H.P. Lovecraft to Lewis Carroll to China Miéville, and it's a very
C.S.
popular
Lewis.
type. C.S. Lewis, that's
He's
another
a big
one.
one.
It's a very popular type of fantasy story. And we're here to mostly talk about three. Alice in Wonderland, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, and Lucretia and the Kroons, although it does tie into a couple others that we are reviewing later this month and next month. The House on the Borderland and On London.
On London. Love that book.
And then later on, Emily will be taking The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Yes.
So
One of my favorites.
we've just been into Portal Fantasies, and we're reading all kinds of them, and we're going to report on all kinds of different Portal Fantasies coming up in the next couple of months.
Which is really funny because we didn't actually plan it that way. It just kind of happened. I think I've kind of noticed that a little bit with Telltale too. We kind of seem to get into themes without recognizing it until we're like, oh my goodness. So this is kind of our response to that is we noticed that some of the things we wanted to read coming up were these Portal Fantasies, and we wanted to make sure that we actually address the fact that, yes, we recognize that there's this consistent theme right now of these Portal Fantasies, and they are a very popular version. Like I said, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is one of my personal favorites. On London is also a favorite of mine, so I'm really excited that we're going to be doing that one. And of course, everybody knows the story of the Wizard of Oz and things like that, which is a very, very common Portal fantasy and has been a huge part of pop culture since it was written, despite the fact that it was originally a children's story. So it's just really interesting to see how it kind of is more of a young adult commonality. You do see it a little bit in some of the, House on the Borderland is a good kind of more adult fiction fantasies, Portal fantasy specifically, sort of situation. But for the most part, this is a young adult and children's story kind of thing.
I think it's
more
very
commonly
popular in that market for the young adults. You see a lot of that. Probably the earliest one I know of is Alice in Wonderland. I've got my copy of the complete works of Lewis Carroll.
I have that same copy.
Recently read this for my first time. I had never read it as a kid. It's definitely a children's story, but it's still enjoyable as an adult. It's a very interesting story. And of course, very different from the movie versions.
Yes.
As always, Hollywood has to make its changes. But in that one, of course, Alice follows a rabbit down a rabbit hole, which is where that popular phrase comes from. And she ends up in this totally different world outside of our own. In the sequel, she goes through a looking glass.
Yep.
So there's multiple portals that allow you to get into this other world that she goes into.
I think it's really interesting, too, that all these portals do lead to this same alternate universe, basically.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the unique things that Lewis Carroll did in this work in particular is that the only alternate reality there is happens to be Wonderland.
Right.
As far as the reader or anyone else knows. And it still encounters all the same characters and different parts of Wonderland, but still very much the same Wonderland. So I think that's what's really interesting about how Lewis Carroll decided to set this story up, is that Wonderland seems to be the only alternate reality as far as one can tell. So. And
Alice in Wonderland was in the 1870s, I believe, 1873 or something like that. I'm struggling to think of any that come before that. I mean, you can probably say it's related to stories like, what's the one with Lilliput?
I have no idea. I'm not familiar with that name at all. It'll come to you at 3 a.m. when you least suspect it.
At 3 a.m, I'll get on the camera and film that part and tell you what the heck I'm thinking of.
Come knocking on my door at 3 a.m. Emily, the name of the story was Greg, what are you doing?
We gotta tape it. No, this
Right
tonight
now.
that won't happen, and that's why I can't think of this. Is that I'm super tired tonight.
It happens.
Okay.
For some reason, the Phantom toll booth is the only thing that keeps coming to my brain.
No, it's really old. Goes back to 1700s, I think. Not Robinson Crusoe, but in that era.
Oh, gosh, it's at the tip of my tongue. With the little people.
Yeah.
Yeah, Gulliver's Travels. There it is.
Gulliver's Travels.
Yes.
Yeah,
No 3 a.m. visits for Emily
We
tonight.
have somebody with a brain tonight.
There it is. We're two halves of the whole idiot, it seems.
Okay. So anyway, even though that's not a portal fantasy, it achieves the same result of he goes into these other lands that are totally different from our own reality that we didn't know existed. And that's the closest thing I can think of to this type of a fantasy before. Well, unless you want to really stretch it and count things like Dante's Divine Comedy. That's kind of like going into another world through.
And that mixes a lot of like
the gates.
theology and things like that into it. That's really interesting. I never actually thought of that as a portal fantasy.
It kind of is.
It is.
And it probably is what led to all the modern portal fantasies, this idea that you can go through something into a totally different world that has strange creatures and all kinds of things going on. And that's probably why it's also a popular subject in the horror genre, with House on the Borderland and the Dunwich horror, where they're coming out of another dimension.
Yeah.
Even H.G. Wells wrote portal fantasies. I've talked about the Plattner story about a guy that goes into another dimension, and Wells used that as a metaphor for death. This guy going kind of into a limbo before you would go to heaven or hell, and there's these
kind of into like a purgatory situation sort of thing.
and so there's these spirits that are following him around as he's in this other world.
Yeah.
So even H.G. Wells wrote that kind of portal fantasy where somebody slips into another dimension. So what was your overall impressions of Alice in Wonderland?
So I had never read Alice in Wonderland as a child. I had only ever read it when I was in high school. I happened to be taking a class where we were kind of delving into some of the works of Lewis Carroll for a little bit. So we read like the Jabberwocky, and we read Alice in Wonderland, and then we read I read independently through the Looking Glass, because I had never even, like, at that point I was so uninformed about Lewis Carroll. He was just not on my radar until I took this class. So it ended up being kind of one of those weird situations where it's like, well, now I'm just on a Lewis Carroll kick. I thought it is a very trippy story. One of the things that I think is really interesting is that it uses a lot of the psychology of basic childhood fears, and it uses a majority of them based off of what psychology considers childhood fears. Loss of sense of identity is a huge one. That's a major theme in Alice in Wonderland, because Alice is trying to figure out, like, because she's in this new realm, who is she now? And she encounters like the flowers, she encounters the carpenter and the walrus, and still has this like penetrating question of who she is and all that, the aspect of that, and then like encountering the queen, who is also asking the same question. So it kind of felt like it was a really good coming of age story, but it was very much a culture shock story as well. Kids like what's familiar and become very unnerved by things that are very foreign to them. They're very curious, so they're like fascinated by them, which you see in Alice a lot. So I could see, though this is a children's work, I see this as being a very traumatic story for children to read. Personally, I liked it. I think reading it in high school was not a problem for me, but had I read this at a younger age, I think I would have had a lot harder time. And by that point, all I had encountered was the Disney version, the animated Disney version, which I also did not see as a little kid. I saw it more when I was like in middle school
Mm-hmm.
for the first time. So it wasn't something that was really interested me at first, but I enjoyed it at that point. But I could foresee myself being a kid and reading this and being like, this is a really traumatic story. It's very dark. It's very dark.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of like things die. People lose their heads. Like this is a very dark story considering that it's a children's story. So
Yeah, but so was a lot of the Brothers Grimm.
yeah, Brothers Grimm is another
that was
Aesop's. Even
kind of
Aesop's fables have always been very, very dark. So
Yeah.
I see that it was very much along that lines. But for like my generation and stuff, I felt like I have dark humor. I'm okay with it, but a lot of people are not. And when I
Yeah.
was younger, I knew I would not have been okay with that dark of a fantasy. But I enjoyed it at the time that I read it.
I think I would have been okay with it as a kid, but I never did read it as a kid. I didn't even read it as an adult. I read it a couple of months ago.
College is when they
First-
made you
so,
read.
Yeah, my first exposure to this story really was Tim Burton's movie, which I loved. But
I did love that version. It's
it
very
is different from the original story. And the original story I found it very good, but I think I would have liked it better if I would have read it as a kid, which I regret now not ever having read that. And same goes for The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, which this I have the Oz Chronicles. I believe it's 3 or 4 volumes
Aren't
with
there, like,
all the books.
14 books
Yeah,
or
well,
something like that.
Something like that L. Frank Baum wrote, and
Yes.
then there were some women that continued the series after that.
Yeah.
So it goes on and on and on. And of course, Wizard of Oz, it varies from the popular movie, but the movie does capture the basic story. So if you've seen the movie, you know pretty much the story of Dorothy getting swept up in the tornado and landing in the land of Oz and killing the Wicked Witch of the East. Yeah.
The Wicked Witch.
And so then the Wicked Witch of the West wants to kill her. And so she goes through the land of Oz and sees all these, and that's the interesting thing is L. Frank Baum put a lot of imagination into the land of Oz that didn't make it into the movie.
Yeah. Which is really sad. Like I liked the part with the China people.
Yeah.
I thought that was a really interesting part. Or like that one monster that's name escapes me right now. There's one monster in
Escapes me too.
particular that they encounter that you don't get to encounter in the old Disney, right? Disney did that one? The old Disney movie. So yeah, I thought that there was a lot of stuff. This was another one I read. I had read it when I was younger, but, you know, I was more impressed by the movie when I was younger, I think. So I didn't remember a lot of it. And then I took a children's lit class when I was in high school. And we reread just the Wizard of Oz book. And that was really fun. I do like The Wizard of Oz, I think, more than most Portal fantasies. I think it's kind of a tie for me with that and On London, and maybe The Phantom Toll Booth, too.
Okay, never read that one.
That was a
myself.
good one.
And of course, I just read this a couple months ago, and the reason I did that is because I was taking an interest in China Mieville, and she said I should read On London, so she borrowed me her copy, and right on the cover, it's comparing it to Alice in Wonderland, Wizard of Oz, and The Phantom Toll Booth. So I thought I got to correct that because I knew I already had Alice in Wonderland and Wizard of Oz, and so I thought I needed to read those first. Both of those books are very quick reads. They're simple. The language is simple. Wizard of Oz especially, the language is extremely simple. So reading it as an adult is less enjoyable than if you would have read it as a kid.
It's not a complex story.
No, I mean...
It's not very deep or very thought-provoking,
it
really.
doesn't go
It's an
into much
adventure.
detail about things either. A problem comes up and Tin Woodman says, I'll fix it, and he fixes it 2 sentences later, problem's all solved. And it's that direct and simple and that lacking in the kind of fleshed out detail that we would have in a book today, or even in Alice in Wonderland. There was more detail to what was going on, but there's a ton of imagination in the book, which makes it really cool.
Yes.
And there's parts to the story after the Wicked Witch of the West dies that aren't in the movie.
Yeah.
There's a whole section that never made it into the movie that was very interesting.
Yeah.
But there again, that was a different sort of portal where she was swept up by a tornado and landed in some land that doesn't really exist anywhere.
I just recently saw the sequel film to this, The Return to Oz.
Yeah.
I had never seen that film before until 3 days ago.
Did you see the one they did more recently where a guy goes
He's
to
the
Oz
wizard?
and he becomes the wizard?
Yes,
It's
yes, I've seen that one.
Okay.
I saw that one. I saw that one in theaters with
forget
friends.
the name of it, but that was only a few years
The Wonderful
back.
Wizard of Oz or something.
Okay.
Or just Oz, maybe.
Yeah, I forget. But that was a good movie.
Oz the Great and Powerful. That's what it is.
That's it.
Yep, there it is. I knew I'd come up with it eventually.
But that was a good movie. I never saw The Return to Oz.
Yeah.
That one, when it came out, it was pretty clearly Disney doing it simply because it had a robot in it, and they were trying to, R2-D2 was all the rage, so they had to have a cute robot in the black hole, and they did Return to Oz, which had the TikTok, I believe.
Yep, TikTok.
So they chose that because they had these cute robots.
Yeah.
That kids would like.
That was a pretty fun adventure story too, and I like the combination of I like that they integrated a little bit more of the mythos that Baum came up with. So Ozma's in it, lots of other characters. Princess Moby, I think, is hers. All these people who make other appearances in his works were mentioned and brought into that particular story as kind of an after the fact sort of thing. And plus it was a really good combination of live action and stop animation. I thought that was very interesting. I liked that a lot. So it was kind of cool to see them integrate other parts of the mythos into it, but I'll be honest, I did not read a lot of it because that is a lot of dedication.
Yeah.
I have all the books in digital copy.
Okay.
All of them, the complete works, but I have not read all of them because it's so dense. There's so much to dedicate time to.
Yeah, well, I went and bought these. This is volume 1.
Yeah.
I believe there's 3 volumes altogether.
Yeah.
These were from Borders Books, put these out when they were in business. And then they sat on my shelf and I never opened them. That was 15 years ago.
And one of the things I thought was really interesting is Frank Baum himself, Albert Frank Baum, he puts a lot of ideals into this work that are in entire opposition of the kind of person he was. He's very inclusive, almost socialist in this work when you start reading a little bit of the background. But he himself was super racist and super capitalist. So it's really interesting to see this work and then know the man, and it's what are you? Were you what do you believe?
Yeah.
And to see this geared towards children too, this is a very influential piece for being in opposition to what he already believed. You would think he would kind of write more in line with what he thought. And you see glimpses of it. But for the most part, I thought it was really interesting that he writes so in opposition to his actual values.
Okay. But he also was writing, he was writing for the market.
Yeah.
So he definitely was writing to meet what the demands of the market, and wasn't writing so much from a personal standpoint. And
I kind of appreciate it about him, because I would not have enjoyed this work as much.
No, if he would have written it from his own personal standpoint, there would have been Indians being slaughtered all over the place.
I know.
It would have been bad.
Complete genocide. It would have been terrible. And I also like the response to this that McGuire came up with, because when this went into public domain, we got works like Wicked, Son of a Witch, all the others. Let me look at my shelf. They're over there. I can't read it from here. I'm blind. Anyway, Lion Among Men and the other one, that fourth one. Those were all really good, I felt, works that kind of spun off of this. So you kind of go back into that portal fantasy a little bit.
There's kind of an interesting take on it in the musical Into the Woods.
Yeah.
I saw that performed up in Door County. That was very good.
Yeah.
Don't remember a lot of the details, but that was an amazing musical, and that brought in a lot of these children's stories, all these characters together into one story, and made a point really about the AIDS epidemic that was going on at the time that was written.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very good musical. So, yes, these portal fantasies can be used for political goals.
Mm-hmm.
So that's two of them. One, there have been a lot through the years. Like we've said, a lot of them for children's stories, like the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Mm-hmm.
That's portal fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
More recently, you have On London. That's portal fantasy, very much like a modern retelling of Alice in Wonderland. That's a simple way of describing the book.
Also, Garth Nix' Keys to the Kingdom series is very much a
I
Portal
didn't know
fan.
that one.
Yeah, that's another one we should. Okay, I love Garth Nix. We need to stop reading him, but let's not and say we didn't.
And they've been written
so good.
They've been written for adults. We mentioned The House in the Borderland. There's works of H.P. Lovecraft where he has monsters coming through portals into our world. There's 2001: A Space Odyssey. It's a portal fantasy. Let's face it.
Yeah,
Goes
it's
through
halfway through the
Stargate.
book, but yeah, it is.
So,
technically.
there are a lot of adult versions of the portal fantasy. There are others that have people transported by other means to other worlds, like the Barsoom series.
A Wrinkle in Time is another one.
Yeah, that's another one. Those are all related to portal fantasies.
Mm-hmm.
A more recent one that I read, Lucretia and the Kroons by Victor Lavelle.
And you're going to have to tell me about this one because I've not gotten a chance to read it yet.
That was a very cool story. It's more of a novella or novelette by Tor Books. And I was wondering, he has another book out called Black Tom or something like that. It's kind of like an updating and purging of racism of Lovecraft.
Oh,
but
interesting.
But in a nicer way than Lovecraft Country.
Okay.
And I was wondering, is this guy any good? Should I waste money on that one? And so I looked in Apple Books for one of his works that was really cheap, and came on Lucretia and the Kroons, which was written just a couple years back. It's about a 12-year-old girl, and she goes into a room upstairs where there's supposed to be these creepy people who died there, but they never came out, and the apartment was never rented again. So the myth is that they're still there. So her friend is dying. Her friend disappears. Of course, that's a kind of a battery flashing.
Oh no!
Hold on.
There we go. That's better.
Okay. We're back. Let's see how long this one lasts.
All right, you were at the point where her friend goes missing.
Yeah, her friend goes missing. Her friend is dying of cancer. And the metaphor is that her friend goes up to this apartment, but it's actually death. So the apartment is a portal into the afterlife.
Oh, interesting.
And yes, the people who used to live in the apartment are still haunting it. They're still hanging around. They're still there. So they chase. So when Lucretia goes up there after her friend, they chase her through into this one room that then goes out into this forest.
Oh, interesting.
And things get weird from there. Lot of great imagination, especially the flying rats. I mean,
terrifying.
Very large swarms of flying rats. I thought that was really
very
cool.
Unnerving.
The ending is appropriate. That's all I'll say about it because I don't want to spoil it. It's a very, very, very good story. I was extremely impressed by
I have to read
and
it.
I want to read more by Victor Lavelle. And this is an example where it's a portal fantasy, and it's one that's been written just in the last couple of years. So the portal fantasy, even though there's lots and lots and lots of them out there, there's still fresh ideas.
Yeah, they never really get old. You see it's such a reoccurring theme because I think the appeal of portal fantasy personally is that we are more ourselves when we're out of our element. And it really brings about a lot more deep thought, I think, about who we are as people and identity and how are we going to react. It has that playful curiosity where it's like, how would we react if we were put into this very foreign situation? And it really makes us, and children especially, think deeply about, okay, if you encountered something that was very outside of you or very different than you, you know, would you behave the same way? Or wouldn't you? Like, what would you change? And I think it plays with the imagination a lot more than most other fantasies.
Well, and it connects to the way we are as kids, because we all have had those times, those games where we went under our bed or in our closet or up in the attic and pretended we were in this other world and played at whatever fantasy entered our minds, and that's where these stories kind of come from, is that kind of play that we all did as a kid.
And I think too there's a lot of, I like that a lot of the time you wonder, like it's a pretty much a common trope, like Wizard of Oz or Lewis Carroll or like Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. It's a common trope. When they come back, did it really happen?
Yeah.
Like they even question, like, was that real? Did that really happen? Did I really encounter these people and this stuff? And even like, I like that trope a lot because it's so common. But if I was in that situation, it's very relatable. If I was in that situation, I'd be like, how much of that was, you know, me dreaming and how much of it actually happened?
Yeah.
Like, did I fall asleep under the tree? Did I really fall down the rabbit hole, so to speak? I like that thing where even they question if it was really real or not.
Right.
I appreciate that a lot.
Right.
But yeah.
So I think we're talked out on that subject for now, although like I said, we've got a number of books and stories coming up that fall into the same subject of the portal fantasy. We've got the Dunwich Horror coming up. We've got Unlondon coming up. We've got the House in the Borderland coming up, and maybe some others that I'm not thinking of.
Yeah, we might slip in a few surprises with you guys.
And I think what you said earlier about us kind of tending to get on these streaks where we're examining these similar stories. That's the great thing about literature, is you read one and then you find out that there are these others that are similar. You know, somebody tells you, hey, this one's kind of similar, or you read in a review or a book that there's these others that are kind of similar to it, and so you investigate those, and you kind of go on this whole journey through similar subjects and explore. And that's the great thing about reading, is that you can explore all these stories in that manner.
They kind of river,
follow your own path.
And some of them take on more than one version. Like you might be in a portal, and then the next thing you know, you're in, I don't know, science fiction, and you didn't know it. Like these twists can happen in these fantasy stories that make them so interrelatable and have these common themes. So yeah, Telltale, we just decided to embrace this one because we noticed the theme and we're like, let's just dive headfirst into it.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate that we had the opportunity to do that too, because it is such a big part of literature, having portal fantasies. So this is a big deal thing. So I'm excited to do it.
So in this video, we've got two that definitely go on the top tales list.
Yes.
On our website.
The Telltale top tales list.
Alice in Wonderland and The Wonderful Wizard of Oz are both on there. They're both excellent stories. They're both better if you're young, but you can enjoy them as adults. You just have to remember that they're written for a younger mind, and they're a little more simple than what you're used to.
They're still inspiring. That's the nice part.
And then there are stories like Lucretia and the Kroons that, Lucretia and the Kroons, I think I would advise for adults. It's a lot creepier than Alice in Wonderland is.
I don't know. Kids these days are into some weird stuff.
Okay.
Probably middle schooler stuff and up.
Well, yeah, when I was, in junior high school, Lucretia and the Kroons wouldn't have
fazed me.
Been bad for me. Younger than that, I didn't read, so I only read Peanuts and Beetle Bailey.
Who didn't? Even I read Peanuts when I was younger, so
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all we got for you guys today. Like, subscribe, let us know what you think. Tell us of other Portal fantasies that we might be able to look into, because we always are looking for other books to kind of plug into our schedule. So if you're interested in any in particular and want to suggest them, let us know. We'll take all suggestions we can. So we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.